Okay, so now that we know what a servitor is, now we need to find out how to actually create one. If you didn't watch my previous video, I'll link it here above. So go and watch that. It just goes into some details about what a servitor or thought form actually is, and it has a look at some other aspects, such as the egregore, the group mind or the mob mind, basically aspects of the thought form, really. Now, generally, we go through our daily lives and we actually do create thought forms on a daily basis. Maybe not a daily basis, but we do create thought forms subconsciously, without actually consciously going about the act of creating one. But to consciously create a thought form or a servitor is a lot different. It has a more direct intent to it. As I said, we spoke about what a servitor is previously and what we can use a servitor for, so let's just get straight into the actual creation. So the first step you want to take is to create a sigil and a name. And you start with a basically sigil work, Sigil Magick to begin with. So I did create a video about actually how to create a sigil and how to use Sigil Magick. So I'm going to have a look at that video. So I'm not going to go through the whole process of creating the will sentence, creating the actual sigil, etc., etc. But once you've got to that point where you have your broken down will sentence, then you just got like a few consonants, a few letters in this little space, and then you put the letters together and you create a sigil. The actual glyph. When I'm talking about that, I'm talking about the actual glyph. So the actual glyph, the actual sigil, becomes the sigil of the servitor. And then what you can do is take the broken down will sentence, so those few letters that you've got that you created the sigil from, and you can form that into a name. Now what you're going to have to do, because it's all consonants, because you took out the vowels, you're going to have to add vowels in. But it's just a case of looking at the letters and just trying to say them. So let's randomly take some letters, M, P, let's just take M, P, R, N. So if you were to say that phonetically, it would be umprun, bit difficult. So then what you can do is add some vowels into the actual, within the letters, so that you can actually create a name out of it. So what did I say? MPRN. So moprun, moproon, maproon. You can be creative. Just do whatever you want. You can even move the letters around. So rapman. Okay, well that was random. Rapman. That's kind of sounds a bit like a musical servitor to me. Alright, so I think you get the gist of what I'm trying to say, is that you just take those letters and you just create some kind of sound that creates a name for your servitor. So then you've got a name and you've got a sigil. So that's step one. Then step two is the actual creation process. Now the creation process itself, what you're going to want to do is you're going to need your sigil, and you're going to obviously need the sound, the name, because you're going to be using that as a mantra. And with the creation process, the basic format is that you need to generate a lot of energy, and then that energy gets directed into the sigil. And I'm going to mix a bit of the Kabbalistic approach that I learned into this as well. With the Kabbalistic approach, when you're actually creating the servitor, or the thought form, or the artificial elemental, whatever you want to call it, you build up the energy and you project it, and with each projection it creates like a ball of energy, and that energy can be whatever color you need it to be. I mean, you can color correspond it to the purpose. If it's money related, you can use green. If it's love related, romance love related, you can make it pink. If it's sexually related, you can make it red. You know, if it's about purification, protection, you could probably use white, even black if you want to, if you view that as protection. It's you know, black could be the color of earth. You could even use brown, but then because it's earth, it's a strength, it's a barrier, you know, protection. So use color correspondences that you feel would work for your purpose and how you feel about the colors. But basically, as you project the energy, each time you project onto the actual sigil, then you create this ball of energy, and it keeps building and building and growing bigger. Now there are a lot of different ways that you can create or generate the energy that you actually project onto the sigil for the creation process. But one of the most common used ones within Chaos Magick is to use orgasm, because orgasm, it generates a lot of energy and very quickly as well, but it's very intense. So obviously with orgasm you can use the ritual solo or in a couple, in a group if you want to. Just be sure that if you're going to be creating or doing this in a group setting or as a couple, you know, this obviously involves sex, so you're going to want to make sure that you trust every single member, every single party that's involved. Trust is a huge thing. It has to be. If you don't trust somebody in a situation like this, then you're in a bad place. You're in a very bad situation. So make sure you trust everybody. But as I say, you can do it solo, you can do it in a group or as a couple. But whatever you're going to do, it's not just about the orgasm and generating the energy. The main reason why orgasm and sex is widely used within Chaos Magick to create a servitor is because sexual fluids are representative of the creation of life, whereas blood is representative of sustaining life. So that's why you would use sex, because you're going to want sexual fluids on the sigil, which then generates, and obviously also the orgasm generates the energy, builds up the energy, intensity of the energy, and then you project that onto the sigil and you create your servitor. But I mean, if you don't want to use sex, that's fine. There's a lot of other methods you can use. You can use drumming. You can use dance. Dance is actually a very good one. I would say you can use spinning. I wouldn't use it myself because I know I'll get dizzy and fall over. But that's just me. Can you? So I said drumming. I mean, you can use basic meditation and visualization as well, where you actually, well, not meditation itself, but more breath work. So as you breathe in, you pull in the energy from the outside, all around you, and then you form it into a ball, and that ball gets pushed out of your arms, out of your hands, and into the object. So you can pull in the energy, build it in your own system, in your own body, and then project it out of your hands. So it's just basically building up energy and redirecting it. But you know, if you're going to be creating servitors, you're probably at a stage in your magical career and your magical practice where you do have a method that you use to actually generate energy, to build energy. So I'm not going to go too much into that. As I say, there are lots of methods you can use. But now, if you, this is obviously the creation process, so I'm going to split it into two here. So one would be just building up energy itself and using that for the creation, and the other one would be using sexual fluids. As I say, sexual fluids are representative of the creation of life, so it is a good method to use. If you haven't used it and you're not opposed to using it, then give it a try and see how you feel about it. Okay, so that's the creation. So what you do is you build up the energy, you direct it onto the sigil, and you create like a ball of energy, which is your actual servitor. And then at that stage, you pass on the name. Sorry, you can also use, for building up the energy, you can also use the mantra, the actual name itself. So you can just repeat it as a mantra over and over and over again. Puts you into a trance state and also builds up energy. So you can use that one as well. So at this stage, you then name your servitor. You speak to it and you give it its name and its purpose, what it will be doing, what it will do. If it has a lifespan to it, then tell it what its lifespan is, and after that period, it will then dissipate or reabsorb, depending on which method you use to actually eliminate the servitor. And then after, that's the activation process, and you just then let it go. Now, some people will do the creation for just once, and that's it. Other people will actually build up the creation and the energy over a period of days. So what you can do is actually repeat the process for a week, every day for a week. And that actually really gets the servitor, the energy into it, and it really builds it up and makes it bigger and bigger and bigger. So you repeat that process for every day for a week, and on about the third or fourth day, you'll find that you actually start feeling the energy of the servitor. You may even start feeling a personality emitting from it. And then after that week, you can then just sustain it and feed it. It's very important to feed it. If you don't feed it, then it just basically sizzles out and dies. So after that 1 week, you then, every week for a month, you feed it. And the feeding process is quite simple. You just project the energy into it. If you want to use blood, then use blood, because as I say, blood sustains life. So you build up energy and you just project that into it. That can be done. It doesn't have to be sexual. It doesn't have to be orgasm. It doesn't have to be sexual fluids, because that part is the creation. This is the feeding. The sustaining of life. So you can actually build up the energy. You can use the name as a mantra and build up the energy that way, and then project it in. And then after a month, you can then feed it every 2 weeks or once a month. It depends what the purpose of the servitor is and how often it's being used. If you're using the servitor a lot, you might want to feed it more often, because it needs the energy to actually go out and do its work. Just like we need to feed and so that we can get energy and we can carry on working. It's the same thing, really. So if you're really using the servitor a lot, then you're going to want to feed it more often. And the final thing is housing. No, sorry, not the final thing. Still got one more other thing to go. So housing. You don't need to buy a house for it. It's fine. You can just get you can get some kind of container or object even. It can be a statue. It can be a box. It could be a crystal ball. It can be whatever you want it to be. But make it pleasant for you. If you choose an object that you don't like, then you're not going to like the servitor, because the servitor is going to be housed within the object. So make sure that it's something that you like looking at, that you enjoy. And then all you do is you just speak to your servitor, you invite it into the object to be housed. If it doesn't like the object, then choose a different object until you find one that you both like. And that's it basically. So the reason for the housing is that, okay, some servitors, as I say again, it depends on the purpose of the servitor and what it's actually doing. Some servitors go out and they constantly going back and forth. Maybe they're collecting energy, maybe they're collecting knowledge. So they don't need to come back and periodically remain in one place before they get sent out again. But if they do get sent out, but occasionally, but they're not out constantly, then you can create the house, the housing for it, so that it can come back and it can rest. And what you can do, you can actually just put energy into the house, so when it does come back to rest, it can feed on the energy from there. With some servitors, again, depends on the purpose, you can actually create a permanent house. It would be, you would actually tie the servitor to the object. For instance, if it's for protection around your property, you can take a stone or a rock or something and use that, and the object would then become the permanent house of the servitor, and it enters into the rock. You then place the rock on your property, and when it needs to do any kind of protection, then it can come out and do whatever it needs to do. So there's lots of reasons why you would need an object or housing for the servitor, and lots of reasons why you may not need one. But okay, so now the last thing I just want to discuss about servitors is the death of the servitor. So if you're creating a servitor that you want for a long period of time, maybe the rest of your life, it could be a protection servitor, for instance, that you just want to keep around forever, you can program it to die when you die. You can program it to, if it's the kind of servitor that only needs to do a particular task for a period of a year or a month or whatever it may be, then you can program it to die after that period. And when I say die, I mean there's two methods. There's either dissipation or absorption. So dissipation is where the energy just dissipates and it becomes nothing. This will happen if you don't feed your servitor, unless, of course, it becomes slightly sentient and finds a different source of food rather than you. So if it's the kind of servitor, just as an example, if it's the kind of servitor that is going out to influence people in whatever manner, then what it could actually do is latch onto those people and start feeding off their energy, and that will prevent it from dying. But usually dissipation will happen if you don't feed it. So if you stop feeding it, it's going to dissipate, fizzle away, and become nothing. The other method is absorption, where you absorb it back into yourself. So if you've used your own personal power to create the servitor, then in the creation process, you've projected that power out onto a point. So what you can do is then just from the servitor itself, then you just absorb it back in. So in that case, it becomes an extension of yourself. It's an extension of your personal power. It's like a bit like externalizing. You could even say externalizing an archetype of yourself, of your own mind, of your own being. So that's it basically. So give it a bash and see how it feels. And, you know, you don't want to create too many servitors. In fact, you know, that in order to sustain a servitor, you have to give it a lot of energy. So if you've got one servitor, that's actually plenty. So make sure that what you're actually creating it for is something that you really, really need. If you have 5 or 10 servitors, the amount of energy that you've got to expend is astronomical. So, you know, you're going to end up giving all your energy away to 10 servitors, and you're not going to have any left for yourself. So keep it to a minimum, and you know, just make it 1, maybe 2. But just make sure that it's something that you really, really need in your life. Otherwise, you're going to have a servitor that you are going to end up with a bit of a grudge about, because, you know, you're stuck with this servitor and you can't make another one because there's just too much energy expended. So make sure it's really something that you need. And that's it. If you like my content, please like, share and subscribe, and give me a comment. Let me know your opinions and your thoughts. If you've got any questions, just leave them in the comments, and I'll address each and every one of them. And that's it for this week. Next week I'm going to talk about, it's going to be the same thing, creation of a servitor, but in that case it's going to be an artificial elemental, because I'm going to speak about it from the Kabbalistic point of view and how it's created in that tradition. And I'll see you next week then. Cheers.